Welcome to episode 34 of Rubbish Talk with myself, Alistair Meldrum.
Myself, Jane Bond.
And today we have Marcus Holden from BACB Renewables. More about Marcus later, but first of all, news on the waste management front, Jane?
Yes, I've got here that Scotland's recycling rate hit an all-time high. So apparently Scotland generated 10.16 million tonnes of waste and recycled 62.3% in 2022, which, according to this, is the highest recycling rate since the start of, well, it says, the start of it actually being recorded in 2011, which seems 62%. That's pretty impressive. It's increased by 5.3% in 2022 from a 57% rate. It's all figures, this, isn't it, in 2021. So I think, it looks like it's going in the right direction. Also looking at only 23.2% of all waste were disposed of in landfill. So that's an all-time low as well. And energy from waste use has increased by 8.3%. So we've got a reduction in landfill, increase in energy from waste, loads more recycling, jobs are good. What do you think, Alistair?
Well, I'm probably in a little bit of trouble. Jane was up a bit of a negative comment about it, and because I think the recycling rate's great, but that's across Scotland as a whole. And when you look at, but if you break that back down to what's happening at household level, it's not really that great at household level. And I just think by pushing that sort of information out all the time, you give the impression to the public that it's all rosy in terms of household waste recycling. And reality is, as we know, it's not. There's loads of food waste still there. There's loads of recyclate still there. There's loads of contamination in the recyclate. And we've got a long way to go before we really actually get the vast majority of the public to recycle their waste properly.
I suppose that's true, because when you look at the volume, the amount of waste produced, there's a heck of a lot of construction, demolition, excavation waste, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's one of the highest volumes. And I suppose some of the companies that we work for, like Brewster Brothers, they've increased and their recycling capacity, and recycling a lot more construction demolition waste. So that certainly adds into it, doesn't it, I suppose?
Yeah. There's certainly good progress. Some of the waste operators that are contributing to that recycling figure increase are doing really well. But it's, I would say largely the increase in recycling has been driven by the organisations doing it rather than the public. And we need a combination of both.
Yeah, but we still need to increase our recycling rates and get all that food waste out of our bins.
Get that 80% of the population that aren't using their food waste to start using their food waste bins.
Absolutely.
It's easy, but I did notice that West Lothian Council have done a trial about reducing levels of contamination, and very promising results according to their press release. What was a little bit interesting was it quoted percentage figures, but we didn't know what the percentage figures were off. So it'd be good to see an actual sort of proper report about that in terms of what they were comparing the reductions by and so on. But by the looks of it, some intervention telling people their bins were contaminated, proper contamination policy seemed to result in improvements, and I'm sure reduction in cost to West Lothian Council.
Well, yeah, exactly. Reduction in having contamination in the recycling and things like that. Well, that's good.
Maybe there's a West Lothian Council employee that's a listener to this podcast that'll be our future guest and could come and tell us all about it. That'd be ideal. So I'm desperate to try to remember who I still know at West Lothian Council. So if you work at West Lothian Council, you might get a wee tap on the shoulder via email from myself.
Watch out, watch this space. Yeah, the other thing, which is not so great, but I guess it was going to have to come, was Biffa preparing a £100 million lawsuit against Scottish Government over DRS. I mean, they threatened to sue the government, again, this is from the deposit return scheme that was postponed. And I guess, again, there's a lot of companies that spent a lot of money preparing for it, and there's got to be some payback somewhere. That's what it's looking like. Biffa are after. So we'll see. Apparently, Biffa declined to comment when approached by Circular Online, which is where we got our information from. I think I would too if I was them.
There you go. And I did read something recently about the Irish deposit return scheme seems to be going very well. So they introduced it on a gradual basis. So if you had old stock, so you only needed to charge the deposit on the newly labelled stock. So old stock that wasn't labelled never had a deposit attached to it, and they seem to. So they're sort of phasing out the old stock with no labels, and the new stock's coming in with labels, and the deposit return seems to be working well. So maybe there's lessons to be learned there. I can't actually remember where I read that, so I'll need to maybe do a little bit digging before the next podcast. And while we're talking about Ireland, we see that Northern Ireland now requires continuing competence test for operators of waste management facilities. So this has been a rule down in England, Wales for lots of years now, that you needed to do your continuing competence test every 3 years to maintain your status. It looks like that has been now launched in Northern Ireland. So Scotland at the moment is the only country that does not require any continuing competence for managing waste facilities. So maybe watch this space. Maybe SEPA will decide that would be a good idea. I don't know.
Yeah, you'd like to think so, that you just have to keep your competence up to date, wouldn't you, really, if you're managing a waste facility?
Well, I know we do it. I know I do it, and all our assessors and staff with COTCs do it. It's a good thing to, I do find when I have to go and do it, because it'd be really embarrassing if I failed it. I do generally need to refresh my memory before I go and do the test. Generally, when you go and do the test, you're doing it beside all the teenagers that are sitting their driving test. Because it's done in the same assessment centre. So when you go in and say you're going to do WAMATAB, particularly in Scotland, there's I've not had one of these for for years. Yes. So there you go.
Oh, well, interesting. The one here I've got is as well about Textile Recycling Association, about the sector being on the brink of collapse due to global market challenges. I think this is quite sad, actually, that the financial crisis, global market challenges, unable to collect textiles from charity shops, recycling and community textile banks because processing plants have reached capacity, because there's nowhere to take them anymore. We all talk about, take your clothes to the charity shop and kind of things like that, but the low quality textiles it says here, are driving up operational costs from fast fashion. So again, people don't want these like scabby t-shirts, do they? That cost £2 from Primark. And it's just a question of where they're going. It says France, Denmark, Sweden, Finland and Austria have proposed a ban on the exports of used textiles within the EU. European countries potentially halting textile sorting operations. So it's like, well, where's it going to go? How are we going to manage all these textiles that are floating around and there's no use for them anymore?
We need to do away with the fast fashion, the disposable fashion. I do know, Jane, I was in the gym the other day, and I am known to wear t-shirts that I get free at races, and quite often they've got a year stamped in them. And I did notice the one I was wearing at the time was 2018, which is 6 years old. And it's actually, I could probably get another 6 years out of it before it properly starts falling apart. That's the problem.
Well, do you know, I went to, because, I did quite a lot of cycling. And I went to a second-hand clothes shop for cycling gear. And I bought like some really good quality cycling shirts, cycling t-shirts, and things like that. And I bought about 5 things for 25 quid. One of those would have cost more than that. And I was thinking, that's just such a great thing, because again, you get, like you said, you get t-shirts for your different races. Well, there's cycling shirts there for different charity events and things like that. And if you were going to buy them from the charity event, they're like 40 quid, something like that. Whereas they're selling there for £10, nobody's worn them.
I think the other big challenge with the textiles is the sheer amount of different fabrics and percentages of material. And we've found out when we've been trying out the Plastel machine that'll tell you what type of plastics and the fibres and so on, and it's all really varied.
That Fabritel machine, isn't it? It tells you how much polyester and how much cotton and things like that you've got in your textiles. Yeah.
But then that obviously makes it really hard for them to recycle. So it's one of these ones that ideally don't produce the waste in the first place. So wear your t-shirts for 6 years or 12 years if you can. is the bottom line. The challenge with mine is making sure you use the special washing powder so they don't stink.
Yeah, actually, you could give me a clue on that one, Alistair. Have you got special washing powder that you can take away all the sweaty smells out of it?
Sainsbury's did used to do a really good one, but they've stopped supplying it. I can't remember the name. But the only thing that really works is actually soak it in vinegar before you wash it.
Really? Soak it in vinegar?
Soak it in vinegar.
Use a lot of vinegar then.
Soak it in vinegar before you wash it, and that does take the bad smell out of once you get them bad.
Okay, well, I'll go with that one then.
But there is a couple of brands that do sort of a sports wash type thing. Anyway, and we had for April the 1st, we had a little bit of an April Fool that seemed to go down quite well, Jane.
Well, yeah, I thought it was pretty convincing, because I was showing a couple of people, my friends, and I was showing them the video. I'm sure everybody's seen it, but the video there of how we were going to collect waste, we were going to, litter that had been dropped, how we were going to monitor, take a sample of it, measure the DNA, and be able to trace that back to people. And we had the little video there, and a couple of people that I showed were like, "Whoa, that's really cool! How do you do that?" And I was like, "Wait till tomorrow when we'll tell you." And I was like, "April Fool," but that was quite impressive. So how could we do that? Because I think that'd be a good idea. There's a few things that may be a problem, maybe a kind of stumbling block.
Yeah, it'd be a great idea, Jane. But I think the two stumbling blocks, I did put a bit of thought to this. Two stumbling blocks are: one, there's not a national database of everybody's DNA. And I'm sure if we get asked to do that, there'd be a bit of an outcry. And two, quite often multiple people have touched, so if you buy a bag of crisps, the shopkeeper will touch that, or the shop worker will have touched it. So how do you do it? But what did occur to me was you could certainly do it with dog poo. So every pet owner, and this is, well, if you think about it, probably every single council in the UK, their biggest complaint is probably in relation to dog poo. So every dog must be registered, it must be chipped, and at that time you take a DNA sample. So you put together a DNA database, and when the dog poos and it's not lifted up, the council come along and sample it, check the dog poo, and fix penalty fine.
My God, the council could make a fortune.
The council could make a fortune, and very quickly the dog poo would vanish off the streets. So
good. Well, I think that's a good idea. I was thinking, going back to vapes and cigarettes, perhaps what we do is, anytime you've got to buy some cigarettes or a single-use vape, you have to have a DNA sample taken. So that again is a big database of people, and then so if you find cigarette butts everywhere or disposable vapes, you can just take a DNA sample, and there you are, you've got them. Do you think that's a bit extreme?
No, not at all. I personally think we in the UK are absolutely playing at litter management. We're just, I was abroad very recently, and the place was spotless in comparison to the UK. And we're doing the same old, we're writing reports, we're doing this about litter, and we're not actually, really tackling it.
Okay.
But maybe we're being a bit radical, but I think just even taking it down a level to making McDonald's print car registration numbers on packaging. So the packaging's chucked out the window, then you can trace it back to the car. And I know the Scottish Government's trying to make that, it would be the car owner would be chargeable rather than because at the moment the problem is you don't know who's in the car, so you can't put a fixed penalty on it. But we need to be much more radical about litter. That's my view.
Yeah, I think radical's good. DNA samples, dogs, smokers, McDonald's, sorted.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah. So anyway, I think it's been a busy weekend for you, Alston. What were you doing?
It has. I was running about the mountains. Well, actually, not really running about the mountains. I was staggering around the mountains during Storm Kathleen. So I was doing the Bruce's Crown race, which is down in the Galloways, which last ran about 30 years ago, and some kind runner called Nicky Spinks has resurrected it. So it's a circle of 45 miles and 40 tops in the Galloway Hills. 40 tops, yeah.
Wow.
So our group started it. We had to run as a group of 4. We started at 4:30 in the afternoon. We finished at goodness knows, I can't actually remember when we finished, about 10, 11 o'clock the following morning. And the weather during the night was pretty rough, as in heavy rain and gales. We had to navigate. We were in the dark. We were floundering about in the heather lost at various points. And then Saturday morning, by the time we started heading south on Saturday morning, we were into the full frontal of Storm Kathleen. So we were almost crawling up to the summits, and we were almost crawling off the summits. So you can tell it's windy when I've got to make an effort to run down a hill against the wind.
Well, at least you finished, eh? I mean,
we did finish.
All credit.
So only 8 teams started, and only 4 teams finished. We finished 3rd team. Unfortunately, we were well and truly cuffed by 2 ladies teams who beat us by a considerable margin. The first lady.
I'm not going to make any comments, Alistair.
Well, I would say fair play to the ladies because they did well. Our team was in their late 50s and 60s. The leading ladies team, I would suggest, were all under 30, and some of them I think were probably under 20. And quite a few of them are almost GB. If they're not GB athletes, they're close to being. So that was our excuse for them beating us. But the second ladies team was probably near our age, so we've actually got no excuse for letting them win. So
they were just,
they were just better
navigators,
Absolutely, no, they were certainly better navigators. And most of us, the first ladies team was pretty impressive because they actually had not run the route. They were doing it straight off map and compass, whereas all of us had been on the route and I'd actually done the route before. So, but it never looks quite the same in the dark and the clag at night.
No, well, fair play to you. That's, I'm glad I was tucked up and nice and cozy in my bed while you were running around some mountains in the rain. I don't know where I was rather be.
The actual worst bit, it was for, so some of the funds went to the Galloway Mountain Rescue, who did an amazing job in the support, but they actually had poor sods up on top of the hill, so there was two mountain rescue people every so often on the hill, and they must have been absolutely frozen.
Yeah,
at least we were moving, whereas they were sitting still and having to wait for the teams to come through, in the rain and the gales. So big, fair play to them for sitting out. Done. So and just by pure chance, a year ago yesterday, I had a wild camp in the Galloways last year, and the weather was amazing because I remember it vividly. So it just shows you how our weather our weather changes year to year. So there we go. Anyway, I think that's enough news for us. So As I said at the start, we interviewed Marcus Holden. I've known Marcus for probably about 25 years. Marcus specialised in landfill gas. We dive into a pretty detailed discussion about landfills straight away. So just for people, listeners that maybe aren't aware of landfill sites, so landfills, generally how waste used to be dealt with sort of pre-recycling and so on, and there's still a big percentage of waste goes to landfill. But eventually landfill will go anaerobic, and the bacteria in the landfill sites will start producing methane, and quite often we harvest that methane to generate electricity. So we have a bit of a technical discussion about landfill gas, and the two main things you need to worry about when you're managing a landfill site is making sure you manage the leachate and the landfill gas. And we have quite a detailed discussion with Marcus about that. So nothing else from us. Over to Marcus.
Hi, Marcus. How are you?
I'm fine, Jane. Thank you very much. Yourself?
I'm not too bad, thank you. It's good to see you again.
Yeah.
And we've got lots of questions for you, because we know that me and Alistair are a dying trade in terms of landfill and the experience we've had on landfill, and you're the same. So we need somebody to, champion the landfill at the moment. Everybody's into energy from waste and all these newfangled ideas, but there's nothing better than a good old landfill.
Absolutely.
So I suppose the first question is sort of who you work for at the moment, and what your sort of background is with that organisation, and what does it do basically? What's the organisation do?
Well, I now work for a company called BACB Renewables, who are an independent holistic decarbonisation consultancy.
Correct.
And we provide feasibility, detailed design, tender support, and client agent services to a range of public and private sector clients. As you can probably tell, I'm reading that from a sheet there, because that's what the ND's written down. But the other side of the BACB is the virtual environment services, which looks at digital twins and air quality, energy management, that sort of thing. And we also have a sister brand, which I'm a director of, called BACB Biogas. And we're the exclusive agents for England and Ireland for gas cleanup technology, which is one of the biggest reasons I came over to join. Essentially, I'm really interested in that side of things, cleaning gas up from AD and from landfill sites, if possible.
Yeah, it's quite, I know we've worked with you before on a number of landfill sites, looking at landfill gas and trying to work out how we can get the gas out, how we can improve the gas volumes and quantities and qualities and all this sort of stuff. And it's it's more of an art than a science, I think.
It is. Well, there's a lot of science behind it, but the science, it seems to be somewhat of an art form in some people's eyes. It's actually not. There's some real solid science behind improving gas from landfill sites, and it's absolutely essential these days, because you need to get the most out of what you've got, as the landfill sector and the amount of waste going into them is declining.
Yes, I guess that's the thing. And with the sort of biodegradable ban to landfill in Scotland as well, then without that biodegradable element, then you're not good. Well, I suppose you're not producing gas, but then you're not making the most of what you've got, I guess.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I've found over the time that I've been in landfill is that people aren't making the most of what they've got. Now, when it was the heyday of landfill, that was fine. There was more gas than we could cope with. But these days, when the gas curves are dropping off, there's less biodegradable waste going in there. The technology and the work hasn't been put in my opinion, to really make the most of what the landfill sites can produce.
And I suppose that then leads on, Marcus, to, as well as reduction in revenue, there's a environmental issue there as well, because you've got all these landfill sites that are emitting methane to the atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. The name of the game these days is, as I say, to do with do the best with what you've got. It's also an industry that's got a bit of a bad reputation just lately for odours around the country. The landfill industry really needs to pull its socks up and do something more about stopping environmental odour issues and methane escape issues as well.
I'm just trying to think back, Marcus, to when I first met you, and it's probably going back 25, 30 years when we were first putting so at the time I was running 2 landfill sites and we're putting in, the gas collection infrastructure and then the engines to run the plant. And at that time it wasn't new, but it was all quite new. We were sort of stealing technology from the North Sea and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, well, it hasn't changed essentially. We're still drilling wells into landfill sites to get the gas out of them. We're still putting suction on there to pull the gas out of the landfill site itself. What has changed is the technology in terms of how we space these things. It was always a rule of thumb. Oh yeah, we will just put a well there and just put a well there, and I don't know what's going to happen there, and we'll connect it up with whatever size pipe work. It was very much rule of thumb, and it still is to some extent in certain areas of the business, but there has definitely been an increase in knowledge about extracting gas from landfill sites, the sizing of the pipe work, the grading of the pipe work. And I think in the UK we are actually quite good at it generally compared to the rest of the world. I've been over in other countries looking at landfills, and the technology in most other countries that I've visited is way behind us. So it's something that we should be proud of in many respects.
So in terms of when you were talking about cleaning up the gas, what do you mean by that? How does the gas need to be cleaned up, and why would you do that? What's the purpose?
Well, landfill gas is very similar to AD gas. So it's around about 60%-ish methane and about 40% CO2-ish. But the difference is with landfills is that because there are open areas and holes in the landfill, there's also things like nitrogen and oxygen coming into the mix. And with some of the chemicals that have been put into the landfill itself, such as paints, newspaper print, that sort of thing, you get strange gases, you get VOCs that are coming out there that you don't get with AD. So the process for cleaning up landfill gas is turning it into good quality methane to put into the grid or to compress it, just the same as AD. The difference is that you've got a few extra things to deal with. You've got oxygen to deal with, you've got nitrogen to deal with, and you've got some VOCs to deal with. So it's a little bit more energy intensive than it is for AD plants.
So how do you get rid of that? So how do you concentrate the methane and get rid of all the other bits and pieces that you don't want?
Well, what you do first is you put it through some carbon, some activated carbon, and the activated carbon gets rid of some nasties like VOCs and hydrogen sulfide, which means you end up with a mixture of methane, nitrogen, oxygen, and CO2. The next thing you want to get rid of is the CO2, or you want to separate the CO2 out rather, and you can do that 2 ways. One's through pressure swing absorption, and the other is through a membrane system. And with a pressure swing absorption, you absorb the carbon dioxide and let the methane through for a period of time in a batch process. And with a membrane, the membrane size separates out the CO2 from the methane. Yeah. With the CO2, you can actually do something with it. You can clean that up a little bit more.
That's what I was going to ask, Marcus. Can you use the CO2?
Yeah. And people do use the CO2. They usually liquefy it, so you clean it up a little bit more. Make sure there's no nasties in there, and you compress it and chill it, and you liquefy it. And it's used in all sorts of things: beverages, welding, heat pumps, all sorts of things like that. So then the methane carries on. the methane, nitrogen, and a very, very small amount of oxygen mixture carries on into a second stage, and you pull the nitrogen out. And there's two ways mainly of pulling nitrogen out of this mix. One is again in another pressure swing absorption vessel, and another is to freeze the nitrogen out using essentially cryogenic distillation. And you end up with a pure methane product, which you can either just pump into the grid, or you can compress, or you can liquefy it and make liquefied gas.
Wow.
Can that
That's
be?
yeah, that's really interesting. So I'm presuming when you were saying that was quite energy intensive, I can see what you mean by that now. But is it better? Is it more efficient? How does it compare to burning and utilizing that sort of methane as energy? What's
in a landfill, in an engine? So
yeah.
if you think about the fact that if you take the input gas, the landfill gas itself, and you say that that's got 100% energy in there, when you clean up the gas, you get in around about 90+% of that energy back out as gas. Yeah. When you put it into an engine, it only works out at around 30 to 35% efficient. You're essentially throwing 70 to 75%, 65 to 70% of the energy that you put in out as heat, and that comes out in the radiator or exhaust. So yeah, it's quite wasteful.
That's really interesting. That so it actually is more value or to actually extract the methane and the carbon dioxide. And I suppose you get two for the price of one there, don't you?
You do.
You know, because you've got your methane, you've got your carbon dioxide, and you know you can use one for heating and one for your Coca-Cola or your beer or
well, absolutely.
whatever your fizzy drink sorted.
If you can clean the gas up and use the CO2, you're looking at a virtually zero emissions process there.
Does it scale down, Marcus? Because that's the challenge at the moment. You know, quite often with landfill sites, to get the connection to the grid, you know, there's a big cost to get an electrical connection to the grid. So there's quite often landfill sites that have methane, but not sufficient to justify getting a connection to grid, putting generators on and so on. But would it scale down to these smaller sites if you could use the methane locally?
We are working on scaling down the size of some of these gas cleanup plants. Yeah, that's something that we're talking to our suppliers who supply the technology to do. Currently, I would say that it works at about over 300 meters cube per hour ish. That's the sort of rough bottom end that it runs at this moment in time. Maybe a little less there. The one advantage that it's got a few advantages. Gas cleanup it can operate over a larger range than engines can. So engines have a minimum amount that they can run at, and obviously a maximum. Gas cleanup tends to have a larger operation range. So it'll handle the gas as it depletes from the landfill site, dropping down, and you're still able to create your methane from it. But yeah, we could do with some small units. There's no doubt about that. We need some improvement on technology and a bit of research in there so we can get some small gas cleanup units out there working on some of the older landfill sites. That'd be great.
Sounds good, Marcus. Sounds good. You can see we've already dived down the rabbit hole of methane and before we even got to the normal questions. So, just taking you back a step, how did you get involved in waste management? What's your background and history?
A long time ago, I started off life as a chemist and then moved into sort of general project management, managing at the end some power stations. So I was putting in 10 megawatt power stations, which were very popular at the time, the small gas power stations. And I was also packaging up CHP units and landfill units. And I got made redundant and then worked for what was the Training and Enterprise Council as a business advisor. At the same time, I had a recruitment agency, which I specialised in power generation. And I ran that in tandem with a job. And a job came up for a company called CLP Envirogas, for a project manager, and I looked at it and I thought, actually, that looks quite interesting. So I didn't put it out, and I applied for the job myself. So
That's cheeky, Marcus.
It sounded really good. Yeah. So I got the job, and that's what started me off in the industry. I've still never got the fee for that, actually, to tell you the truth. So
I like that. So I presume there was no intention to really join the waste management industry. And
not at all. I mean, mainly at that point in time, I was involved because I got the power generation background, and I gradually learnt about waste management from some of the guys that I was working with, some excellent, really, really good engineers, and learned about landfill gas, and then extended, and I left CLP and I moved to Waste Recycling Group, as was then. It's now FCC Environmental, and I was their project manager and landfill gas manager, and got involved in tipping operations and engineering and capping and all of the stuff that goes with landfills, because I wanted to know about it, because I was arguing with the operations team at that point in time. So yeah, and then became a consultant, essentially.
And WRG or FCC was an interesting one, because I can't remember the total history here. You'll probably remember better, Marcus, that they ran the landfills and they ran the power generation sites, and then they sold off the power generation to Infinis, didn't they?
They did.
As a separate entity.
Yes. Yeah, a guy called Guy Hans came in and he bought WRG as a whole lot, repackaged the two as two separate companies, kept the power gen because it was incredibly profitable at that time, and sold off the landfill operations to FCC. That's a company that operates from Spain, and did himself quite a good deal, actually, because he did a deal where he didn't have to pay, FCC didn't to pay any royalties for the landfill gas, the power generated, for a considerable period of time. So he did quite well. He made a lot of money out of that.
And now all these sites have been shifted off to, is it Valencia Waste Management?
No, that's the Viridor sites. Yeah.
Oh, so it is.
Yeah. So all of the Viridor landfill sites were sold to Valencia. Viridor have still kept the incineration and waste sorting and other operations, but all the landfill sites have gone across to Valencia now. Yeah.
Everybody seems to be getting rid of these landfill sites, don't they? Big liabilities. We can see there's not enough gas being produced anymore, and kind of that's where they're going, I suppose.
Yeah, it's harder. There's no doubt about it. It is harder work these days to run a landfill site and be profitable than it was a few years ago, and the regulations are harder. And of course, landfill tax is not cheap either, and we all know it's just gone up around about 126 quid, something like that now, for landfill tax. So it's hard. There's no doubt about it.
Yes, I suppose in a way it has done what it was supposed to do, hasn't it? Shift it away from landfill, but they're still going to need landfill.
Yes.
Surely.
Yeah, I mean, you've got your residual wastes in the bins. And I know a lot of that is going to incinerators these days, but you've still got a lot of commercial waste that's going to landfill. You've got inerts that's going to landfill, and even with everything that we're doing, sort of soil wash plants and things like that, you're still going to need landfill. Bottom ash, what are you going to do with that from the incinerators? It's difficult not to have some form of landfill at the end of the day. I think what we need to do in the landfill industries is make them safer, make them cleaner, and make sure that they're operating in the right way.
I think the real challenge, Marcus, is looking after some of these legacy sites. And there's a site fairly close to us that's sitting homeless at the moment. It's not been looked after, in Ayrshire. That it should be getting looked after. The gas, the leachate, everything should be getting looked after. But it's for various reasons, the company went broke, and it's effectively been abandoned, and potentially that's going to continue to happen across the country.
I think, unfortunately, you're right, Alistair. I think that's a method of some of the operators for disposing of a problem. They put it into a special purpose vehicle, and that special purpose vehicle goes bust. It's going to happen more and more. Yeah.
See, my logic is we're going to get systems like you're proposing. We're going to get solar panels on the top. We're going to start harvesting the ammonia from the leachate, and then we're going to start mining in landfill sites for precious resources.
Yeah.
So in 20 years' time, there'll not be a liability, there'll be a resource.
That would be brilliant. That would be absolutely. And
it's maybe a pipe dream. It's maybe a pipe dream.
No, it's happening now. It's not a pipe dream at all. I mean, Infinis, my old firm, they are doing ever so well putting solar on landfills, and they're putting a lot on there at this moment in time. It's happening in a big way. Fair play to them. There's landfills. Landfill mining's a little bit difficult because, especially with landfills that have still got some activity in them, you've got odor issues. Yeah, so that makes life a little difficult. It's been tried, and there are definitely some issues there to look at. But putting solar on them and turning them to other uses, I'm all for it. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, the gas cleanup side of things can benefit from solar as well, because to clean gas up uses electricity. There's no that you've got to compress the gas to do it, and it makes absolute sense to put solar panels on the landfill site to power the gas cleanup units.
Yeah, there was a site in North Ayrshire that's getting all those solar panels being put on it.
So. I know that one well, Jane.
Yes, you know that well. You have walked all over it.
Yeah,
there you go.
Every inch.
Any looking back in your career, any favourite projects or any sort of memorable times?
Obviously, apart from the one landfill in North Ayrshire and having to walk all the way around.
Absolutely, I did actually quite enjoy that project. I really did. It was interesting. I think there are people on that now doing the work, and it's going to make a difference. But yeah, I mean, I've worked abroad. I've been out to Palestine and Israel looking at landfill sites in Albania, and that's interesting. It really is, to see how other people do it or don't do it. You know, I put a couple of power generation proposals there together for those sites. That was interesting. There's been some other interesting projects like Auchincarroch. Actually, Alistair, I remember that well. When the site was taking some slurry waste, if you remember that, the odours were quite strong on the site. Yeah,
a slight hydrogen sulfide issue.
A bit of a hydrogen sulfide issue there. Yeah. It's a it's a predecessor of what was happening today. Yeah, the site was actually producing that much gas. I remember starting up the flare, and I switched it on, and the blower was on. And there was it looked like a jet turbine coming straight from the top. There was that much gas there. And I switched it off. I thought, right, there's something wrong here. And I switched the flare off, and the flame was still there. It was still blasting at the top. There was that much gas in the site. It was literally just blowing through the pipes. You didn't need to pull it out with a blower. It was just incredible. Absolutely amazing.
And that site does sit in the top of a hill, so everybody around could see it.
Yes.
That was a beacon.
It was certainly a beacon.
The flame was about 5 or 6 meters high, I think, as I recall.
I do actually remember when we put some of the smaller rigs in, and you used to literally light them with an oily rag, which, when you think back to the days, it's like,
Well, I was just going to say, there was one site I remember working from home one day, and I had a phone call from a guy called Paul Baker, who this was at CLP. And he called me up in a panic. He's, Mark, I've set the site on fire. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, I was lighting the flare with an oily rag. Yeah. And he dropped the oily rag on the floor, and there was gas coming out from the floor. And he set the pipework on fire for the landfill gas extraction system, and it was burning away. And he was running up the hill chasing the flame.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that sounds pretty scary.
He panicked a little bit. What am I going to do? I says, get the dozer driver to drive over the pipework to stop it, which he did in the end. Yeah, but it had burnt away a fair chunk of the gas pipework. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, wow. What about the worst thing, or the most disaster, or anything like that you've had while you've been working in the industry? If you got anything that's really funny that you actually think,
Well,
At the time, it was
there's
awful,
some funny
but looking
things,
back,
but
it's quite funny.
I wasn't there, but a colleague of mine was, where there was an underground fire on a landfill site. And one of the things that you do with an underground fire is you seal it off. So they got an excavator there and a dumper there, and they were putting clay into this hole in the landfill site where there was smoke coming out of, and the excavator nine disappeared. So I mean, it wasn't funny, but there was a burning void underneath, about 3 or 4 meters deep. The guy got out okay. Nobody got hurt or anything, but they lost the excavator. So they can be dangerous places, landfills.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing with the fire, isn't it? You don't know how far underneath it's gone or whatever. It's one way of getting rid of the rubbish, I suppose.
It is. Yeah. Apparently in China, it was quite common to just set fire to the rubbish and let it burn to get themselves more void. It was a common thing. I've seen it done unintentionally over here a few times, but not intentionally like out there.
Yes.
It was fairly common at one point, Marcus, wasn't it, when people were trying to maximise gas yields and stuff? They were drawing too hard off the site and drawing the oxygen in and then setting it on fire. And it was, for a period, it was relatively common, wasn't it?
It still happens now. Yes, it's very easy to set a landfill site on fire through oversuction. Basically, if it's not sealed properly and you put too much suction on it, you're trying to maximise the yield for your engine, you will set it on fire. There's no doubt about it. Unless you've got really good seals on the site, it's well capped. What you're trying to do when you're getting gas out of a site is you're trying to balance the amount of suction that you put on it with the gas production itself. Hence why the process of adjusting all of the wells on the site is called balancing. That's what you're trying to achieve, a balance. But there's still a lot of people that haven't got the knack of balancing landfill sites, shall we say. It's a tricky thing to do.
Well, the thing is, I mean, if you think about what gets put into a landfill, one day you might get a load of domestic waste, next day you might get a load of tires, or then anyway you might get a load of rubble or whatever. You don't know when you drill into it or when you put your gas wells. It could be going through anything.
Yes.
So and they're not all the same, are they? Which is why they all need those balancing and making sure that it's actually pulling at the right level.
Yeah. Each well will produce a different amount of gas on a landfill site, and you need to adjust the suction to each well individually to optimize what gas you're pulling out of it.
Like I say, Marcus, it's an art and a science. It's like it's not all going to be the same.
So I mean, there's other funny little things that I've heard of in the past, like again, lighting flares with rags, where somebody's taken their eyebrows off and the hair off, walked away smoking.
We shouldn't laugh, really.
We shouldn't laugh. No. To be fair, it doesn't really go on these days. Health and safety has improved considerably on landfill sites, but a few years ago that was quite commonplace.
Yes.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So moving on, Marcus, anything about your role when you got involved with landfill? Did it change your opinions, habits about waste? Are you a changed person in terms? You were probably back in the landfill heyday, where everything was chucked in the landfill. Now we're recycling.
It's changed such a lot, to be absolutely honest. I mean, when I started, it was throwing waste into a hole. There's no doubt about it. It was throwing waste into a hole, run a compactor over the top of it, and forget about it. And interesting things used to happen, like the gas used to run through the sides of the landfill, and a few houses were blown up. So technology has improved. We've started lining landfills. We've started putting leachate extraction in landfills. We've started capping landfills properly. There's gas extraction now, where back in the day, it was very, very basic. So the technology has improved massively over the years. What surprised me when I came into the industry was the sheer amount of landfills in the UK. It's incredible. there's probably about 500 operative landfills, but there's around about 22,000 landfills throughout England and Wales alone. Right? It's everywhere you look, there are landfills, and people don't recognise that they are. Quite often they look like parks, or people build houses over them, and they're everywhere. They're very, very common, and that was a big eye opener for me.
Yeah. I remember working for a council down in England and dealing with a lot of closed landfill sites then.
Yeah.
And trying to sort of manage them, because the trouble with closed landfill sites isn't there's no revenue coming in, there's no money coming in, but you still got to deal with them and manage the liabilities from it. So yeah.
I take it you're like, sorry Marcus, I take it you're like me, and when you drive around the country you point out to your family and friends where all the former landfill sites are.
I am, yeah. I bore my family and friends to death with that. Yeah, I mean, I'm even doing it while I was abroad. We was on holiday in Malta, and we were catching the bus from one part of Malta to the other, and there's a landfill site on the bus route there. Yeah. And I'm looking over, I wonder what's going on with that. So I'm looking out the bus window and pointing it out to my wife, and she's saying, just forget it, you're on holiday,
Malta used to have some
I probably
fires.
saw the same one, Marcus, when I was there, and I was sitting on the bus, and I said to my daughter, there's a landfill site over there, look at that. And she's like, Mum, you're so sad. It's probably the same one.
Yeah.
Malta has about 4 big landfills, and at one point they were all on fire, and quite significantly on fire.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a skip hire company in Glasgow, a guy, I can't remember the guy's name. It was never the best operated site in Glasgow, but he had a holiday house in Malta. And by default, he ended up being the consultant that dealt with these landfill fires. And he wouldn't have known how to put a landfill fire out if he didn't have a clue, but it was a way of earning some money when he was over on his holidays in Malta. So there you go. I think they've improved since then, because I was in Malta about 4 or 5 years ago, and it did seem, the one you see from the bus did seem fairly well organised. So
yeah,
hopefully they've got themselves sorted.
I was chatting to one of the operators of a lining company who does some work over there, actually, and he was telling me what it's like to put black plastic down there for either lining or capping. He says you can only work for a couple of hours when in the middle of summer, because the heat just hits you, and you end up passing out. So he'd work for an hour or two, go and take a break, cool off, and then carry on, or he'd be working late on till the evening, either which. That black plastic in that sunlight must be an absolute killer. It really must.
Imagine the wrinkles in that.
The big question I want to know is why the majority of landfill lining and landfill gas companies, contractors, are Welsh.
Yes, and not just Welsh. They're from Ruthin. Yeah,
they've cornered the market.
Yeah. It seems to. It's not just landfill lining contractors as well. It's also a large proportion of the landfill drilling in the UK is from Ruthin. Yeah. Ruthin must be just a rubbish town, really. That's
it's quite interesting, because a lining company I was working with recently, they were from near there, and I was brought up near there as well. So we were talking about all these places that I was going to, where I went to school and everything like that. And we said, oh, what about this place? Crikey. I didn't expect to be sitting on a landfill site in Scotland talking about, St. Martin's and Western Rin.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely right. There's a lot of the landfill industry comes from that section of the world.
Yeah.
So busy life with work, Marcus. How do you get away from it all? How do you relax?
Go to Malta.
Oh well, I go to Malta. Yeah, go to Malta. I like the Greek islands personally. So
which one? Or which ones?
Well, this year we're going to Corfu again. So yeah, we went to Corfu last year, but one thing I didn't get to do, I like architecture and Roman architecture and old Greek engineering. I'm a real nerd in that respect as well. So I'm trying to get a day trip across to Butrint in Albania to have a look at the UNESCO site over there.
I've been to Crete a few times recently. I really like
Crete's nice. Yeah, we've been to Crete. Yeah, the Palace of Knossos, I really enjoyed that. And yeah, I dragged my wife around all these places. She absolutely loves it. She does, honestly.
Yeah, that's what she tells you. Yeah, no, that sounds nice actually. I need another holiday, Alistair, by the way.
You're just back, Jane.
I know, I just came back from Dubai, Marcus, a few weeks ago, so I'm planning the next one now.
Yeah, there's some landfill sites out there as well, Jane. You could have just popped in and had a look. Yeah.
I don't think they've got the same leachate problems, though, to be fair.
True enough, I suppose.
So what about your current role? You just said that you've moved roles. What's your hopes and challenges in this new role? What you're looking for in the future?
What I'm trying to do now is, again, we really want to develop this landfill gas cleanup technology and also some small scale AD. And the government have just put out a consultation, the Department for Net Zero, where they are looking to increase the amount of gas into the grid from something like 7 terawatts to 40 to 50 terawatts. They're looking at you know about the fact that we now have to separate off food waste. That's come in, and all of that food waste is going to go to probably AD plants, which is a good thing. So we also have some small scale AD technology, in modular AD technology that we're bringing over here that works like a cow's stomach, and we're looking to sell some of these into the market and service this requirement for food waste.
When you say cow's stomach, the cows eat grass.
They do, but
I'm just wondering how that works with like apple cores and bits of bread.
Well, one of the problems with food waste is it's varied. So you've got fats and you've got amino acids, you've got carbohydrates, and you've got long chain fats, etc. Some AD plants can find it difficult with a single digestion unit to actually deal with all of the different types of food waste that's put in. This plant has multiple chambers, so you can do some different biology in each chamber, so it can deal with the different aspects of the food waste.
Okay, so it's kind of like got a starter tummy, a main tummy, and a pudding tummy.
Something like that, yeah. All of these different stomachs have got different biology in them to work with different things. So they can be much more efficient in dealing with the actual waste. So quite excited to move on. What else are we doing? We're doing some air measurement technology. So we've got some technology where we are measuring the gas and hydrogen sulfide output from anything, but particularly landfill sites. And we can actually put these units in and pinpoint the source of emission roughly within about 8 meters on the landfill site itself. So we're doing some of that. I'm still looking at doing some general landfill consultancy. I'm doing Desir work. I'm doing some landfill gas optimization.
You need to explain Desir. What does it stand for?
Now you're asking me what Desir stands for now. It's basically the regulations that are looking at stopping things exploding. And I can't think of what it stands for, Alistair, at this moment in time.
No, Alistair, you're Googling it.
I'm Googling it, don't worry. The Dangerous Substances and Explosives Atmospheres Regulations.
Exactly that, yeah.
2002.
2002, yeah. So I'm doing some work producing explosion documents for that, and doing assessments on that to see how dangerous compounds are and landfill sites are. I'm still doing some landfill design. So general consultancy on the landfills also, but a lot of gas cleanup and AD work, which I'm excited to move into because it's a new field for me. Certainly AD is.
It's quite interesting because it's kind of like moving on the technology into the future to try and maximize what you've got, really, isn't it? Yeah.
But I think that's absolutely right. For both landfill sites and AD, one of the problems with AD, the way that the plants are constructed at this moment in time is they're big. So they're beasts that you've got to keep fed with your food waste and your crops and whatever. And, that they operate at a certain throughput. They can, therefore, it costs the same to run whatever feedstock you're putting through there, whatever amount of feedstock you're running through there virtually. I think the modular way of AD is the way to go. And that's again, new technology. And with landfill sites, it's all about maximising what you've got. I'm really keen on doing that in both the form of measuring what's coming out from the landfill sites from the surface and from developing techniques and training people. I also actually really enjoy training landfill gas extraction. I've developed a few training courses for that, and it's not just a source of income. It's actually quite a passion of mine to pass that information on to people in the industry and improve the whole state of the industry. Because as I say, I think landfill's got a bad rep, and in a way deservedly so. And we need to sort of tidy our act up as an industry, cut out the odours and improve the gas collection efficiency.
Yeah,
so a bit of a mission there to do that.
So there's a lot of information there. Is there something that you would like to share with all our listeners, all our hundreds and thousands of listeners? What's something from your job or your sector you think people might not know? You've actually told me quite a lot, to be honest. So I could list quite a few that you've told me that I didn't know. But is there anything specifically that you think, that's a good fact?
I got some notes here of the interesting fact that I was going to put forward, and that's that there's between 19,000 and 21,000 historic landfill sites in England and Wales alone. So I've already used that earlier on. I haven't got anything else, I'm afraid, at this moment in time. But,
I like the fact about the cleanup of the gas and how you could get nearly or over 90% of what you've put in you can get out again. I think that's great. Yeah. That's quite a good one as well.
It's got to be the way to go. I mean, gas cleanup, I'm not just saying that because we're into that now. I'm saying it because I genuinely believe in it. If you think about it, we're overloading the power grid at this moment in time. New renewable projects are difficult to actually get moving because of the fact that we've got under capacity on the power grid. I mean, we can release some of that capacity by changing over some of the landfill sites to gas to grid. So that would, we can put renewable wind or solar projects in to use that capacity. The fact is that the gas grid generally is underutilized. So these landfill gas and AD gas to grid, we've got loads of capacity in the gas grid and we can use that. If there's no capacity or no gas grid in the area, we can compress the gas or liquefy the gas. So it's not stopping projects going forward just because we haven't got a gas grid connection. And broader than that, if you look at the projects in, huge landfills in India and Pakistan, where there's tons and tons of methane coming out, it's just getting thrown out each day. You can't do any power projects over there because the grid infrastructure is just not there. Whereas with gas cleanup, we can clean the gas up, compress it or liquefy it and move it elsewhere. There's something that can be done with these projects. The two projects out that I looked at in Palestine and in Albania, they didn't go forward because they didn't have a decent grid connection. With gas to grid or gas to liquefied gas, those projects can go forward.
I'm not sure about the Palestine one just at the moment. It's probably not the best place to be.
It was an interesting one. It was. It was an interesting.
That whole, visit. If we're going to be serious about climate change and reducing methane, that technology needs to be put out around the world, doesn't it? It needs to.
Absolutely.
We need to make big steps in that and there's probably still a lot of expertise sits in the UK.
Yeah.
For putting that type of process out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is the scope for research and development to improve the gas cleanup technology that we've got now. There's no doubt about that. But that will only come through increased use of it. The more projects that we put together for gas cleanup from whatever source it is, I think the technology will improve, will get better, will get cheaper, and that's got to be to everyone's benefit.
Yeah, definitely.
There you go. We do have quite a lot of international listeners, Marcus. So if there's any international listeners out there listening that've got a landfill site with a problem, then they know who to call. Just give Marcus a wee shout.
Yeah, more than happy to go across.
As long as it's sunny
as I say,
and warm.
Palestine maybe not at the moment. It's a little bit. Ukraine, I'll just leave it until it calms down there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very wise. So can you share a piece of maybe your favourite slang or jargon or dialect that you've come across in the sector?
Oh, what about the sector?
Or in life in general?
In life, yeah. Well, I hail originally from the Black Country, and one of the favourite sayings of my mother said to me when she was wound up was, "Yeah, I've got a cob on," which means,
yeah,
are you in a bad mood?
Got a cob on. Yeah, we used to get that in Liverpool as well.
Yeah.
I like that.
I like that one.
Mm.
There we go. And then we're going to give you a magic wand to do something wonderful with the industry. What would you like to use it for?
What I'd like to do is I'd like to wave my magic wand over all of the landfill sector so that it would work better, so that people would do what they need to do to get as much gas as they can out the sites and to stop them smelling, because the odours are just causing everybody in the sector problems at this moment in time. And I want people not to worry about living next to landfill sites. They shouldn't have to worry about living next to landfill sites, because when the landfill sites are finished, all you've got in front of you is a lovely green field generally, and it's a really nice place to live. So that would be my magic wand.
My theory about odours from landfill sites that was probably gained from having some sites that were odorous on occasion was 9 times out of 10 the odour was because we weren't managing our leachate levels properly, and that was then having an impact on the landfill gas. And quite often you hear about sites with odour that they focus on the landfill gas bit only, and they seem to forget about that they also need to look after the leachate and keep the levels down.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. Leachate's certainly a big cause. Another big cause is not having enough soil and cover soil on site, and having humongous big open areas where you've got massive areas where gas is not coming out in a plume, but it's gradually migrating through this open surface and then getting blown off site and causing people no end of problems, when they're living next to them.
Well, the other big thing that's happened in Scotland is particularly in Scotland, is because we are now mainly on either 2 or 3 or 4 weekly collection for residual waste. Some of that residual waste is going into landfill and it's already started decomposing.
Yes.
So your rate of, in the past you could probably run a landfill cell and it would be a year and a half before it really started producing a decent amount of methane. But because that waste is going in and it's already starting to break down, before it's placed into landfill, that is much, much quicker nowadays.
I completely agree with you. And it's something that we've picked up when I was in my previous company. We were doing surface emissions, methane surface emission testing, running over the top of fresh areas, open areas. And, there is a considerable amount of gas that's coming out from the tip face straight away these days. And you can see the gas actually coming off the back of these bulkers when they're coming in. You can see that the waste is actually gassing because it's warm and it's steaming. And absolutely right, Alistair.
That's why we need to get people to separate out their food waste.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Get,
Like we
get,
keep banging on about it.
get
Things
that
like
80% in Scotland that are not using their food waste collection system. Get them actually using it.
Absolutely, completely agree. Yeah, it's. I mean, AD is a much more controlled and better process for producing gas in landfill. Yeah, but at the end, we've still got landfills. We need to do something with them. So absolutely, get as much biological waste out of the residual waste going into landfills as possible. Completely agree with that, and get it into AD where we can. But we have to deal with the gas coming off landfills. We still need to find the best way of doing it and manage them properly.
I suppose, but is the amount of gas not going to significantly reduce because we haven't got any or a lot of organics in the mix anymore? How do we manage a very small proportion of methane?
The amount of methane per ton, will decrease. There's no doubt about it. And then it just comes to the case of collection efficiency, collection calculation efficiency. Whereas, for example, in the past you might have had well spacings at 25 meters. You increase your well spacings out and you put horizontal wells in to collect the gas, so that you've got a more generalized collection of it. So you can still collect the gas from there. Yes, there's less coming out per ton, but it's still going to be there.
Yeah,
and there's still ways to collect it.
Yeah, and you still need to get that gas. Yeah, no, that's true. So my last question is, what advice would you give to younger people coming in? We're trying to make this business of waste industry slightly more sexy than that has been in the past. And there's a lot of different sort of skills needed, and I don't think people realize quite how many different skills there are. But if you were going to give some advice to somebody who wanted to do what you're doing, what would you suggest?
Be willing to learn and be passionate about what you do.
Yeah. Is that be willing to come round, Marcus, and hold your hold your coat while you're trugging around these landfill sites?
Yeah, I mean, what people don't realise is that the breadth of skills needed in landfill. So you need to be a bit of a geologist to look at the area where the landfill's going to be in. You need to be a bit of a civil engineer to look at how the lining goes in. You need to be a bit of a mechanical engineer to do the landfill gas system design. You need to be a bit of a chemist and maybe a bit of a biochemist to look at how the waste goes in and all the chemicals involved with it, and the anaerobic production of the gas. So you need a range of skills. So I say don't be afraid to learn. There's a lot to learn in proper management of a landfill, plus all of the basics like people management. And Alistair knows full well about that. It's people management on a landfill is one of the hardest things that you've got to do. So it's an interesting career. It really is.
And you've done your bit, Marcus, because you've passed the mantle on to your son, I believe.
I have indeed, yeah. So I started off Taurus 15 years ago, and I recently said, there you go, son, it's yours. Passed the shares on to him. He's now the director of it, and he's running it. And I've come away to develop this other side of the business, mainly, as I say, gas cleanup. So yeah, I mean, he still calls me up and says, hey Dad, what about this and how do you do that? And he's actually sent me through an inquiry today, so bless him.
There you go. Yes, he's well trained obviously.
Yeah.
So there you go. Well, thank you.
I was just going to say, did you take him under your wing at an early age then, Marcus? Did you get him trugging around landfill sites when he was at school? Waste composition analysis, perhaps.
He was around when I was working. Well, yeah, I've been in the industry a very long time now. He was around and saw me doing it, and when I'd started Taurus and he was looking for something to do, I brought him in. In fact, I've got two sons in the business. My eldest son Jason, he works for his brother Luke, who's younger than him. So yeah.
How does that go?
Okay? It tends to work quite well, yeah. They still have a little bit of brotherly
interaction.
interaction. Yeah.
So Luke, I hadn't realised Luke was your son actually, because I was dealing with him when we were on that site in North Ayrshire as well. I hadn't realised he was your son. Well, I knew he was related, obviously, but I hadn't realised he was your son.
Yeah. You can usually tell with the eyebrows. I've passed my eyebrows on to both of my sons. Yeah. So,
yeah. For the purpose of the people listening, Marcus has got very bushy eyebrows.
Indeed.
Anyway.
Well, the hot topic with my kids quite often is which one of them did the worst waste analysis job.
Oh, right.
And they both have quite equal claim to fame. Actually, they both did pretty horrible ones at one point. So I would say it's a draw, but they'll never agree to that. So there we go. Anyway, Marcus, thank you very much for your time today. Much appreciated. It's been a bit of a nostalgia trip for me going down the landfill sector, but it's just, it's really interesting to chat to you and just see how much work can still be done, and how much work still needs to be done in the sector. Yeah. So thank you very much for your time.
No problem,
thank you. Yeah. I'd like to know we're not a dying breed in the landfill industry after all.
Well, there's still a few of us left.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good to speak to you both.